Hello and good day, everyone. You are tuning into the Undeniable Podcast, an ambitious foray into the exciting, yet not often enough explored world of excellence in the Virgin Islands. I am Shea Alexander, the host of this series of exciting conversations, and I am the founder and principal consultant of OAC Group, a multidisciplinary consulting firm offering strategic growth and business development solutions. Undeniable has been curated for those keen to learn from individuals at the height of their career. Together, we'll enjoy frank discourse and unpack what it means and takes to be great, undeniably. Undeniable leans on OAC Group's extensive network of clients, partners, and friends to feature an impressive roster of industry leaders and brilliant minds in riveting, unscripted conversations monthly. So now that I've gotten through the introduction, of course, this is Shea Alexander, your host, and I just wanted to pop in to let you guys know this is actually part two of episode 1, which features Dr. Virginia Rubaine speaking about the mindful campaign, mental health, and intentionality, among the hosts of other topics. I actually had to chop the episode in half, as you guys would have known if you listened through to the end of part 1. So part two just kind of recovers the conversation in terms of speaking about the mindful campaign in particular and the really great success it had enjoyed, which had it featured across the region and actually across the world. So we recapped that conversation very quickly, and then we started talking about matters of funding and the like before we started to transition into sort of the philosophy and the driving ethos behind Dr. Rubaine's success in mental health and across the board. I hope you guys enjoy part 2, and of course, I do apologize for any technical issues. I know at some point you heard me typing, I know I was speaking kind of quickly. This was recorded as one episode, so please bear in mind challenges you may have noticed with episode 1 are going to be repeated in this part 2 because it's really cut from the same audio. But we are, of course, hoping to be better every single time because that is, for me, one of the driving mottos behind OAC Group, always learning. So enjoy part 2 of episode 1, and I look forward to bringing much more exciting conversations to you guys as we learn, grow, and empower each other. Thank you so much and enjoy. You also had to petition Public Health England to be considered as a pilot for the campaign. So talk to us about that process.
Right. So Mind UK was the original campaign that was launched in the UK years ago. It wrapped in 2021 because funding had ended.
Mm-hmm.
It was very successful. What I enjoyed about it the most when the opportunity presented itself was that it was evidence-based.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's something else that I'm really passionate about. We need data.
Yeah.
We can't just keep saying what we think is this or based on what we think we know. We have to have numbers to support. So when the opportunity came for us to be considered, so all the OTs were interviewed by Sue and Public Health England. So Sue at the time was the head of Mind UK.
Okay.
And I did the interview by myself and I succeeded. And so we were selected along with Bermuda to pilot this campaign in the OTs to see if it would be applicable and if it would work.
Mm-hmm.
Based on the work that the Virgin Islands has done, Public Health England continues to engage Sue and her team to take the campaign into other OTs.
Mm-hmm.
So currently the Falklands and Gibraltar are running their pilots, their campaigns. So we essentially, based on the work that the Virgin Islands did,
Mm-hmm.
Public Health England has said, you know what, this can work. And we can take this to our other overseas territories.
So mental health, well, I'll take it micro to macro. Dr. Virginia Rubaine, Mental Health Services, BVI, essentially was proof of concept, and such a successful proof of concept that they were now able to start stretching this out to further jurisdictions.
Correct.
And I don't want to harp on this, but I think this is important to throw in here. And I think for safety, I will say it and you could just probably say, We were not the only pilot. So Bermuda and British Virgin Islands at the same time were attempting to do this. And Bermuda, based off of the presentations I happened to listen to, didn't seem to have enjoyed the same level of success. And I don't say that because I don't think comparison in this case is necessary, but I think what I want to point out is that it wasn't a case of, well, it was just an easy thing to do. That's not what it was.
Mm-hmm.
Because if it was just an easy thing to do, everybody would have done it.
Correct.
It was a case of you successfully, and we're going to now start transitioning to, I think, what's more like the upside of this conversation. What I think you were able to really successfully do is identify necessary resources and start pulling them into your orbit, right? So, and for my listeners, I'm a bit of a geek and a nerd and stuff like that. So sometimes I'll make very obscure references. But there's a bit of a Star Wars book, and you're also a Star Wars fan, that I really like, where Darth Sidious is meditating. And it is something that has stuck with me, and I've tried to practice it in a, obviously it's not real, but he was essentially sitting down and meditating about what he wanted to accomplish. And then, no, this is a bit of the magical bit of it, but then using the Force to sort of pull the things he needed into place.
Well, that's not magical. That's real.
Yeah.
Because I wield the Force.
Exactly. So in a way, I think that's exactly what you did. You started by, you found a funder, right? Obviously, the supports in terms of SWOT already existed. I think another brilliant thing that you did that was not replicated in other jurisdictions, but I think is a key part of your success, you found champions who humanized the campaign. And then I think, I'd like to think, one of the best things that you did was you then pulled in the brilliant, fabulous, and super handsome Shea Alexander and O'Neill Alexander Consulting Group to execute.
Yes.
Why did you decide, and this is really not just, to fluff my feathers up, but why did you decide to seek external support? Because oftentimes people attempt to do whatever, and they attempt to do it in a silo, particularly when it is something pioneering, because I think there's this sort of false gravitas of, I'm going to do this myself so that everybody could say, this was Virginia Rubaine alone, walking up to 2 o'clock in the morning alone, and she got this done alone. But then oftentimes we never get it done.
That's a very good point. I'm not the type of narcissist that requires accolades. I'm a different type of narcissist. And because I have worked really hard in my own therapy to develop my ego strength and my emotional intelligence, it's quite okay for me to ask for help. And it doesn't detract anything from me, because at the end of the day, I am the author and the finisher of this campaign. So bringing in OAC is just part of my meditative plan.
Yes.
To use the Force. But
yes.
It's not about me. There's a scene from Doctor Strange where the Ancient One says to him, it was never about you, Stephen Strange.
Yeah.
And I understand that.
Yeah.
I understand that my legacy will be the improved health of the people. And it will be undeniable. It's the same thing with my uncle. A lot of the things that he was vilified and crucified for during life is what he's being celebrated for.
Yeah.
There's a lot of family stories about when he was trying to bring Social Security to the fore, and he was going and doing his lectures, and he went on mini moke, and the people I won't say which district them were from decided they were going to beat and some very brave civic minded men had to lift up the mini moke and run within it.
Yeah.
So I'm not daunted, and so I am quite comfortable standing to the side and letting other people shine and bringing their expertise. So the reason I brought you in, Shay, is because I was in over my head with the marketing and the social media.
Yeah.
And anybody knows me knows I have absolutely no social media. And I recognize that the methodologies that I had used in the past informally weren't effective anymore. And that's the other thing that we don't understand. What worked in the past season may not work in this season. And so I had tried some things that weren't successful, and I was like, failure is not an option.
Yeah.
Failure is not an option, and I need help.
Yeah.
And you were the best person suited for the job.
Now, we're going to go down what might be, I suspect, probably like the most controversial part of this if we don't handle ourselves carefully. But I think we can handle ourselves carefully.
Sure.
What you just said, right, And it's so interesting because it juxtaposes against what is clearly a very confident person. Well, actually, it doesn't. It doesn't. Juxtapose isn't the word. It supports it. Because what you just said was exactly what an insecure person would die before they can say, which is, I cannot do X. But what I have found as a consultant, literally my job is to fill in the gaps of particularly entrepreneurs. And I'll tell you, if people were as selective in dating as I were with choosing clients, there would be no children in the BVI. And I let people discern what I'm saying when I say that, but I am extremely
Message
selective,
received.
right? And one of the things I look for is I work with clients who are very confident. Because what I don't have the time for is when I start to be exceptional, as is my job, you start to feel threatened. For example, we go in a meeting and we're talking about the marketing element of something. So I then take the floor and you then want to talk even though you don't know what you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
But we have a serious challenge, I think, in the BVI with insecurity. Where does that come from?
Well, insecure parents raise insecure children, and then it becomes a generational curse. It's something that's handed down from one generation to the next. But I think the issue for insecurity is poor ego strength.
Yeah.
And not being able to think critically about a situation. My superpower or toxic trait, depending on who you're talking to, is my ability to go to the future, see what's going to happen, and come back and act accordingly.
So like sit loud.
Exactly. Well, excuse me, I'm on the light side of the force.
Okay.
I'm Jedi Master.
Yeah,
okay?
yeah.
So people's inability to conceptualize and anticipate the consequences of their choices, in my humble opinion, is the biggest factor in lack of or low success. Because, I'm sitting on the sideline and I'm saying to myself, this ain't gonna go the way that you think it is. And I'm like, can't you see it too?
Yeah.
And I've realized that people literally can't see beyond what hurt they're trying to address in the behaviors that they're engaging in.
Foresight is an extremely difficult skill to master. It's one of the skills that I think I am developing quite well. But I think what foresight calls for, again, is a level of humility. Yes. Because one must be willing to accept the path that's appearing in front of them, as opposed to believing that they have complete control over it. However, against that though, you and I speak often about my new favorite word. So actually, when we did our bit of preliminary discourse about this conversation, you used the word intentionality.
Yeah.
And I quickly co-opted it and I decided it's going to be a deliberate part of the branding for this podcast going forward because I think it's so important. What is it? What does it mean?
When we engage in and execute intentionality just in its simplest form, we have a plan. We have a plan that supports a goal. And one of the things that I do with my clients all the time is I have them set goals. And after they've come up with goals, and notice I said goal and not dream. By its very nature, a goal is more reality based and structured on what resources are available to you.
Yes.
Dreams can be magical in nature. They could be unattainable. So let's talk about goals. So I have my clients set goals, and then based on those goals, we devise plans. Intentionality is about having a plan that you consistently and with discipline execute.
Yeah.
And that's it. And that's it. And I find that a lot of people, regardless of age or stage, they don't have a plan.
Yeah.
So every day is a brand new day to try to figure out what's going to happen next. Ain't nobody got time for that. At least I don't. And so everything I do is extremely intentional. And it's so funny because when I moved here, I wrote a list of goals that I wanted to achieve. And when I was moving into my house, I found the list and I was gobsmacked by how much of it I had already accomplished. Because some of the things they weren't like active thoughts in my mind anymore. But clearly in my subconscious, they were always there operating.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me today, if I eat a slice of cake, I'm going to be very intentional about eating that cake and managing the consequences of eating that cake. And that's what intentionality is about.
Mm-hmm.
So every day I intend and strive for peace, whatever
Mm-hmm.
that means for me in that moment. And I have some goals because I'm getting closer and closer to retirement.
Mm-hmm.
I still have some goals for the service that I need to execute before I transition into my next adventure.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you have a plan, so I usually say to my clients, we're going to make a 1 year, a 3 year, and a 5 year plan.
Mm-hmm.
Because we pretty much, after 5 years, anything is possible.
Yeah.
And based on that, I ask them what is realistic and achievable. And based on that, we devise plans. And I think too many people are just flying by the seat of their pants on a daily basis. And then they wonder why they have so crippling anxiety.
Yeah. What I have found to define a lot of people in the British Virgin Islands is what I call completely external impetus. So, for example, in their careers are essentially relegated to opportunities thrust upon them,
Yes.
or that somebody else says, you should apply for this. I want you to apply for this. I'm interested in you moving into this position.
Passive participation.
Yeah. Yeah, and you see that across their lives. But, for the purposes of this podcast, I'll probably stick a bit more to business and career. But how do you guide someone as a mental health professional, but I think also in the context of what we're talking about now, as somebody who has achieved max success in your space, how do you guide someone, particularly through the realistic part of setting SMART goals? Because on the one hand, one should be practical, but on the other hand, one should be ambitious. How do you balance that?
It goes back to what I said. You have to do an inventory.
Mm-hmm.
You have to do an inventory. I could want to be a neurosurgeon,
Mm-hmm.
but if I don't have the wherewithal to get to medical school to become a neurosurgeon after deep analysis of the resources, the strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities, and the threats, then I have to let go of that
Mm-hmm.
and find something that is more attainable and potentially equitable to that particular ambition.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And that's why I said dreams are very different from goals.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where we get confused because we use dreams and being ambitious interchangeably.
Yeah.
But they're very different.
Yeah.
Because to me, ambition speaks to your sustained drive, discipline, and consistency
Mm-hmm.
in achieving a goal.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to lose 10 pounds and you are consistent and disciplined in achieving that goal, then you're ambitious, right? You could dream. I dream about all sorts of things. Some of them not nice. But I'm not going to execute them because some of them might be achievable, but they're not going to bring the consequences that I want. And that's the thing that people don't understand. Every choice has a consequence. And what I'm seeing, especially from your generation and younger, is people are making choices, seemed uber surprised by the consequences, and have the expectation to have somebody else mitigate those consequences. But I didn't agree to that. You can do what you want. That's fine. But I'm not obligated to mitigate the consequences of your choices. And so that unspoken agreement is not going to fly with me.
Yeah. So an unspoken agreement, this is, I presume, where I decide what's going to happen in this relationship we have, and I haven't communicated it to you, and I'm surprised when you don't conform to the ramifications of that.
So you have expectations of my behavior and my choices that you haven't communicated to me,
and that I haven't communicated to you.
Right.
You just assume.
And you experience disappointment and other adverse emotions because I didn't execute the way that you expected me to.
Can we talk, and this I think really goes out to my entrepreneur listeners, if they've made it in, because we're already 51 minutes in. But this is really for people that have attention span, right? Can we talk about unspoken agreements in a slightly different way?
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm going to say this in the best way that I can. I'm not unfriendly, I'm not impolite, right? But I am also not what I would describe as friendly. I go about, and if people speak to me, I speak to them and I engage in conversation. But generally speaking, I don't go looking to make friends.
You're an introvert.
Exactly, I'm an introvert. And there's some people who are quite extroverted. They want to make friends. They want to bring new people into their space. That's not necessarily me. And I think there's validity in both experiences and existences, right?
Absolutely.
But what I have noted is that there are people who have not extended the effort to be liked by the masses, and I think it's work. I have more than one friend, a friend and a cousin actually, who I tended to compare myself to when I was younger and a bit more silly. And I would say I want to be liked by people like they are, because they're almost universally liked. But then I realized there was a level of effort that they were putting into that she was just not willing to extend.
Because you don't want to be liked, you want to be respected.
Exactly. And again, there's validity in both. But my point there is, I have seen a lot of young people engaging in business or attempting to engage in business. They start the business, let's say in April, and by July, they're complaining, oh, people are not supporting me. And I'm like, well, one, you're not somebody that everybody knows, right? You're not somebody that everybody likes. So if it is not on the merit of your product, your brand, or your marketing, or your business itself, why did you expect that? Why did you expect that the community was going to flock and fall over themselves to support you? Why don't you expect, and it's coming back to what we talked about earlier with NECA and the walk in advance, why didn't you expect that you would have to walk to get to at the point where people were willing to support you? What is that psychosis?
It's a delusion. It's a fixed delusion based on their generation. Unfortunately, a lot of these young people grew up in households where they had to do very little to receive very extravagant rewards.
Mm-hmm.
And what I tell parents all the time, you either gonna raise your child for the world that exists, or you're going to encapsulate them in the world that you've created, but it's not going to be both.
And it's not going to last.
Right. And so what happens to these young people is, and the curse of social media, I mean, it's a blessing, but it's also a curse. They're getting images and messages that are not congruent with the reality that they live in. And that's why they're experiencing disappointment. I don't care how local you are, if you are not retailing a product that I want, if I'm not having a consumer experience that I'm enjoying, I'm not spending my money with you. And you can't make me. So shame politics, which your generation loves to engage in.
Sometimes.
BV Islanders are haters. Did you ever stop to consider I don't want your crap? Have
you? Yeah.
Right. No, it never occurs to them because they like it. So everybody else must like it.
Yeah. No, and as a consultant, one of the key things that I have, because I don't work with startups very often, but it's the conversation about figuring out how marketable is this product. Now, mind you, marketability does not have to mean that the market is already intrinsically interested in the product. But if it doesn't mean that, what it then has to mean is that the demographic characteristics exist that allow for you to create psychological associations and brand associations and interest. But again, you have to be willing to extend that effort. So I am a solutions-oriented person, right? So we talked about the issue of the sort of, the weirdness of thought. How does a person course correct and self-correct that? Because I can tell you, I do think there were times when I found myself in the same situation. Well, I started Sikani, I'm selling bags, why aren't people buying from me? How do you self-correct to move forward from that sort of thinking?
I think you have to read the room. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of young people cannot. They're not. When you don't surround yourself with a diverse, what's the word I'm looking for? Selection of resources. If you're only getting feedback from your peers, your information is going to be skewed toward that particular generation, right? If you don't have mentors that are comfortable telling you the truth, that's one of the most discomforting things about living here. I come from St. Thomas. Everybody's motto is, "You think I can? I'll hit you first." But one thing we don't do is lie. We just don't lie.
Yeah.
And so coming here and living here for the past 22 years and watching people lie on social media, obfuscate, spin, it's mind-boggling for me. I will never be accustomed to it. But very often, young entrepreneurs don't realize that people are telling them what they want to hear rather than what they need to know, because you know what? Telling your delusional behind the truth is exhausting. And I don't have it. If you want to believe that selling cars made out of coconut husk is the next wave in the Virgin Islands,
go ahead and do it.
Go ahead and do it.
Yeah, and it speaks to one of the deficiencies that is kind of innate to people that you have to overcome to be an entrepreneur. One of the things that I think has been, and I don't consider myself to be massively successful, but one of the things that has helped me is, and I know that I can come across as not the easiest person to come and tell the truth to, but I have made sure in the branding of myself as a business person and in the branding of my businesses that I expect and engage persons for authenticity of response. What did you think about this? What did you think about this ad? What did you think about this choice? Because if I'm not able to if I'm not able to construct and maintain a feedback loop, all I have is my thought processes, right?
Yeah.
So in the example of Sakani sells handbags that I cannot afford. Neither am I a woman who wears handbags. So if I don't have feedback coming in from persons who are my key demographic, I can only kind of guess at what they want to see. I remember there was a time I was gung-ho to have a storefront. I was desperate to have a storefront. In fact, I had signed a lease and I was paying for it. And I started talking to some of I actually went in my QuickBooks and I ordered from highest spend to lowest. And I started at the top and I started working. And when I called them, I was like, "Hey, what do you think of me having a storefront?" "Oh, well, that's nice, but I just want you to know I'm not going to come. You'll have to come to my office because I prefer privacy and discretion when I spend larger amounts of money." So who was I going to have the storefront for? No, I'm not saying I will never have one.
You're right.
But that feedback was critical, and I don't think people would have been willing to give me that feedback had I presented as well, don't tell me what to do. Oh, no, you have to understand that idea. Oh, that's not my concept,
But then you're not being honest with yourself about where you want the storefront.
Yeah.
And I think that's the issue. People are not being honest with themselves. I think a lot of these young entrepreneurs are sincere creatives, but I think they lack the experience, the wisdom, the mentorship, and the know-how to execute. And I think this is why, you think about like fast fashion. So you want to be a fashion designer here, but you're competing with the global fast fashion industry.
Yeah.
So if I'm gonna buy your piece, I'm looking forward to the next season. And there are 4 fashion seasons in the world.
Yeah.
Whether we change clothes or not for them 4 seasons.
They exist.
There are 4 fashion seasons. So one of the things that frustrates me as a consumer here, I'm touching the microphone, as a consumer here in the Virgin Islands is that products stay on the shelf for excessively long time.
Yeah.
And we don't have a culture here of, okay, this merchandise has been here for 6 months, it's not moving, let's put it on sale and get it out.
Well, because, and I think we're coming along to having to end, but I think you've brought up a lot of interesting points around business that I hope people listen to. But I think this one is a critical one, and it's something you and I talk about a lot, which is there's a level of, and again, I think it comes back fundamentally to insecurity and being a bit too concerned with the opinion of the public. And not in the healthy way of feedback, constructive feedback, but just being interested in what they think unnecessarily. I put the product up for sale, or I make it available for purchase, I should say. And I feel a level of shame to ever put it on sale because that suggests it didn't move. But it didn't move. And it doesn't matter. Just put it on sale and move on. Nordstrom has sales. Neiman Marcus has sales.
But if you're emotionally vested in the movement of your products, you shouldn't be selling products.
Well, it exceeds beyond just movement of the product. It is about the idea I want to perpetuate of my success as a business person.
And that's fine. But in the meanwhile, while you're participating in your delusion, I've moved on.
And you're losing money.
Not only are you losing money because I've moved on, I'm not coming back because you've trained me to expect that you're gonna have products 2-3 seasons old.
Yeah.
And I ain't got time for that. I'm moving on.
Yeah. Yeah. And a key element of branding and marketing is kind of controlling that those sorts of thought processes in your clientele, and that's not a thought that you want to have. But Dr. Ben, we're running out of time, so I have been watching a lot of podcasts, trying to decide how you end the podcast. I'm not too sure, but I do have a question for you, and it's just coming back to the main theme and the main concept of this. You've obviously done exceptionally well with advancing mental health in the British Virgin Islands. I think that is tongue-in-cheek, undeniable, right?
Mm-hmm.
You've done exceptionally well with the mindful campaign, and I think with particularly strategically identifying the resources, both financial, operational, and otherwise, to build a campaign that clearly achieved max success in an international way. What do you think, and if you could distill it down into perhaps a sentence, what are the undeniable characteristics about yourself that allow you to be so exceptional?
Straight off the bat, my integrity.
Mm-hmm.
I will not lie. I will not cheat. I will not steal.
Mm-hmm.
I will not violate the rules.
Mm-hmm.
I have a big mouth. I'll curse you.
Mm-hmm.
But I think my honesty and my commitment to honesty is the thing that's undeniable about me. I actually wanted on my tombstone to say she told the truth. Because in the absence of the truth, in my humble opinion, is chaos. Because you spend so much of your time, your resources, and energy trying to remember the lies that you told, trying to maintain unholy alliances based on lies. My path has been relatively easy because no matter what share, I always tell the truth.
Yeah. So you've been intentional and you've told the truth. Yeah. And that's why you've been undeniably successful, and you were my premier guest on this podcast. Dr. Ben, I had a fabulous time talking to you, as I always do. So this was really one of our natural conversations.
Yes, it was.
With a mic that I borrowed from a friend. That was the only difference really today. I'm so glad that I've been able to have you, and I do suspect as this podcast evolves and grows, I'll try to bring you back, because one of the things I do want to have some future conversations with you about, and I think we started touching on it in the latter part of it, is sort of the mental health behind being successful in business or generally in your career.
Absolutely.
Because I think people don't often think about those intersections.
Oh, there is a psychology to success. Absolutely.
Of course. And I think maybe we should start a podcast called Psychology to Success. I think that's going to be the most challenging thing for me, is trying not to have a million spin-offs based off of every really good conversation that I have. But thank you so much, Dr. Ben. And unless you have any patent thoughts, we'll be wrapping up from here. Guys, thank you. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I do.
Okay.
Don't forget, ladies and sirs, it is fashionable to be mentally well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So guys, we are an hour and 5 minutes in. So if you did listen to my voice and Dr. Rubaine's voice for this long, I really do thank you. We're going to have some really exciting guests coming up. And in the next couple of weeks, once I've actually recorded those, I'm going to start teasing them. But thank you so much for joining us today. And I hope to have much more conversations that involve you guys in meaningful ways, so that we can all think about moving forward and being undeniably great at whatever it is we want to do. Thank you so much for listening, and have a good rest of your day.